The people that work there call it America's sweatshop. There have been cases of attempted suicides. There have been people with nervous breakdowns. People who've worked there for more than a year are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and taking advanced medication for that. And needless to say, this horrible, vicious, nasty company that I'm talking about is Facebook. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the tech giant, which everybody on the outside knows is a very nice kind of a powdery blue kind of place where undoubtedly every single person who works there is paid $150,000 a year to start, and all of the cafe macchiatos that they can possibly drink, if that's such a thing, I don't know. But, there's baristas everywhere, and we have ping pong tables, and we slide to work on slides, and we have beanbag chairs, and we sit around with our Star Wars figures, and it's just the greatest place to be in the whole world, except that it's not. Drudge Report linked a story by The Verge website talking about the people that have to do the monitoring of the content on Facebook. And it is genuinely horrific. They describe offices where there's mildew growing everywhere, that there's nothing but arguments, like a high school locker room, screaming about who's dating who and who's not dating who, physical threats, smells like a locker room, it's just a disgusting environment, the bathrooms are filthy and all the rest. Now, as it turns out, the case that they were talking about specifically is the case of a company called Cognizant, which actually doesn't surprise me that Facebook essentially outsources its dirtiest of its dirty work. And Cognizant is one of those people that tries to keep Facebook clean from things like animal cruelty, mass murder, bizarre sex acts, and discussions of small government. Steve, are you surprised to hear that this particular office in Tampa is dealing with people who are en masse having a nervous breakdown? It reminds me very much of those factories in China where people were just jumping off the roof because they were just working, in these intolerable conditions. And these are people who three of them openly, knowingly violated the non-disclosure agreements that they had to sign in order to work there because they felt that this situation was so bad that somebody needed to make it public.
The conditions are intolerable. I didn't have time to read the entire article at The Verge because it's a really lengthy expose. But from what I gleaned, skimming through some of those paragraphs that I did manage to get to, not only is the job they're doing awful, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the pay and the conditions and their treatment are even perhaps even worse than the horrible things that they have to witness as a part of their job. And we're talking about people who probably need PTSD counseling after a day of looking at these hideous videos that people are uploading.
But how can that be possible? Because everybody knows that Facebook is a friendly place designed to connect the world, and that the people who work in the tech industry are paid absolutely top dollar and work in the most beneficial conditions ever known to man. How can you say such a thing? Unless they're lying.
Well, of course they're lying. They outsource this thing. For all I know, Cognizant is a wholly owned subsidiary of Facebook. I suspect there's some sort of corporate ancestral relationship between the two. What I do know is this: that in order to make this information public, this treatment, these horrible things, that this company named Cognizant have all their employees sign non-disclosure agreements. The irony is just drippingly syrupy thick off of this thing. That said, in the early days of the blogosphere, the internet is social sharing on the internet is what I called. It was horizontal. It's a flat playing field. If you could write something interesting enough that people wanted to read it, they would find you thanks to the magic of the hyperlink. Social media sites are all vertical. They're silos. You've got your Facebook silo here, which doesn't even let the Google search engine's spiders crawl around and search it. You've got the Twitter silo is here. And because these are top-down organizations, number one, it does make things even easier to share. I don't have to rely on some other blogger to help publicize the thing I just wrote. I can zap it up there and it can be seen by as many people as the algorithm allows to see it, I suppose. Makes it easier to share. But that means because it's easier to share, the worst people in the world are going to use it to disseminate their awfulness throughout the world, which means you have to have some kind of filter. And that means you have to outsource this absolute muck-raking job. Well, what's the opposite of muck-raking? Just
generating
something, whatever it is, to keep it from getting out there. And instead of treating these people well for the awful things they have to witness, they're treating them like absolute dirt. I guess, if maybe there's some sort of awfulness in human nature that if your job is watching people smash cats in order to prevent that video from going up on Facebook, then maybe you can treat that person like dirt because the thing that they have to do is so dirty. I'm reaching a point here, Bill, where, the movie version of Frankenstein, the real tragedy is that Victor Frankenstein created this monster, and having seen what a monster it was, tried and failed to destroy it. That's the tragedy of the movie version. If I were running a social media giant like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, I would have to look at the results of my creation and destroy it. I don't know how I could live with myself otherwise.
It's interesting you say that because that is the closing paragraph, I think, of this article. I think it's the closing sentence. That the people who worked here for Facebook, monitoring content and so on, said that Facebook must be destroyed. It just needs to be closed because of some of the things that happened back there. Scott, one of the little examples was that a woman who was feeling sick at this workplace, working for content moderation for Facebook through Cognizant, was feeling noticeably ill, and in an act of compassion that you would expect from a tech giant of the reputation that Facebook has, her manager came over with a bucket for her to vomit in, but under no circumstances was she not going to get her quota of videos looked at during the day. Now, the reason this is important is because Jeff Zuckerberg is constantly out there saying how we don't need any borders, we don't need any controls, we don't need any doors. The world's a giant family and we're all in it together and everybody's doing swell and everything's great. This is the image that Facebook projects, but Facebook is not that company. And if it turns out, Scott, that one of the things that was referenced in there was a guy who basically had a nervous breakdown because he had to keep watching video of these three teens taking a large iguana and bashing it to death against a sidewalk. That qualifies as something that's permissible on Facebook. So the part of this that I find astonishing is that there are people who are having nervous breakdowns because they have to watch acts of animal cruelty that would make any civilized person sick to their stomach, and at the same time, those are getting on Facebook or allowed to stay on Facebook, but us talking about limited government, no, that's gotta go.
Well, one of those things is bad for your health, and clearly Facebook has decided that it's limited government that's bad for your health, rather than that traumatic stress of watching that kind of just madness and violence. I'm kind of with Steve on this. It's like, how do you rescue this? The fundamental model of Facebook's business is to sell you to other people who want to advertise. And to do that, they need to do whatever they can to increase the social networking effect of sharing. And to do that, they have to be able to sort of pander to the most shareable videos, which is going to be the lowest common denominator of videos. Very rarely do you see links, except among my friends, who are like, hey, did you see this History Channel presentation about the War of 1812?
I would watch that.
It's all in, it's in the pre-daguerreotype era. That's the kind of thing. And this is why sometimes I think conservatives feel so marginalized, because, I would watch that. But if you look at trending videos on Facebook now, or YouTube rather, go to YouTube's app or homepage and just click that trending link. And I look at that and I go, what country is this for? What species is this for? how did these become the most watched videos of all? There's, at any given time in that top 20 or so, there's almost never one that I would have watched if offered. And yet somehow it has risen to the top, thanks in part to social sharing, but also the fact that YouTube then has this sort of self-fulfilling cycle where it jacks up things like that are sort of the worst possible things. As members at BillWhittle.com know by now, earlier this year, I deleted all social media apps from my phone, and life has been measurably better as a result of this. I have no idea what's going on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any number of other social media sites, and I don't pick up my phone to go there as instinctively as a smoker picks up a cigarette, even when they're not thinking about it. Should we eliminate those businesses? Well, that's a decision for, the antitrust courts, I guess, to decide. But you personally can say, I am opting out of this. I'm not going to be a part of this. Because remember they had, what was that called? The diamonds that people bought. They're not slavery diamonds, not oppression diamonds. They're
blood diamonds.
Blood diamonds,
Blood
whatever.
diamonds, yeah.
Yeah. So we are shrinking back from buying diamonds that we know are being mined in difficult conditions. Why aren't we doing the same thing with Facebook? Why isn't especially progressives rising up and saying, we can't be a part of this kind of torture and oppression and sweatshop mentality of the sort of the basest side of human nature? We don't want to participate in that. So let's lead a mass movement to get the heck out of there.
So many of the stories we do on this show and so many of the things that we bring up are cases that just simply clarify the chasm, the abyss between what progressive philosophy says and what the progressives that actually believe that philosophy do. Apple talks about a family of mankind, and it talks about the dignity of human nature and how design is going to set us all free. And while they're talking about how design is going to set us all free, there are people jumping off of buildings in China where the conditions that are being used to make those phones is so appalling that it simply boggles the mind. Look, you can put a factory wherever you want to, pay people whatever you want to. That's economics. But for you to get on this moral platform and lecture the rest of us and lecture people like Ford Motor Company or coal miners or oil companies about how advanced you are when you're running the most vile conditions in America that if you weren't left wing would have been shut down a long time ago because they're simply cruel and unusual punishment. So there's that whole hypocrisy angle to it. The thing that is really most interesting, I think, is this idea of Facebook shutting down. I don't think anybody should have the power to shut Facebook down. I think they need to make a decision whether they're a publisher or whether they're a carrier, as we talked about before. If they're just a carrier, hosting content and connecting people, then great. But if you start determining who gets to see what based on their politics, now you're an editorializing that makes you a publisher, and there's that whole argument. But look, here's the thing, folks. It seemed to me that the excitement of Facebook and the thrill of Facebook was when Facebook basically did what a company I once worked for very briefly doing a TV set of shows for. I don't even think they're around anymore. And it was Classmates.com. And for the low price of some insane amount of money, Classmates.com would hook you up with the people who you went to high school with. You'd look up your school and your classes, and you'd had to opt into it and so on. And you say, oh, my God, look how Willie's doing. Oh, I haven't seen June in a long time, all the rest of this stuff. And that was really great. And Facebook took that idea, made it essentially free. Yeah, made it free. And enormously connected those dots. So I love the idea that I can look up people that I knew in high school or college, look them up, see how they're doing, all of that stuff. That's just great. What nobody saw was the censorship involved, and what nobody also saw, I think, was the incentive that Facebook and YouTube provide to especially a generation that has been told their entire lives that they're special and that they're unique, and that the measure of their worth is the number of likes they get on a post and the number of friends they have on a Facebook score. So what the end result of that is is people do the most appalling things, and they indulge their cruelty in order to get views. We see this all over the place. People just doing these appalling things for Facebook so that they can get their 15 minutes of fame and get a bunch of trending likes and all the rest of this stuff. This is a real disease, and it is not going to end well. When you look at any kind of a serious catastrophe now, somebody's hit by a bus, let's say, or a car goes over a bridge, or people are fighting, or maybe there's some alcoholic guy on the street and he's got the DTs. You don't see people bending over to help them. You see an army of people bending over to film them. And they're all looking at a distance with their phones held vertically, getting that footage to make sure that they can get all of those likes and all of those views and all of those subscribers and all the rest of it. Human nature is to take everything that exists and find a good side and a bad side to it. The question, as Scott said, and I think as Steve said, is not up to the government to decide. Facebook does not have the business to censor our political views and have the immunity of being a carrier. That said, I don't think Facebook needs to be destroyed or banned. I think, as Scott said, and as Scott actually did, there comes a time when things mutate to the point where the positive that they have generated in terms of my being able to communicate with cousins and all the rest of that stuff, which is just a complete good as far as I can see, start to get outweighed by the bad. And given the beating that social media has been taking publicity-wise in the last several months and year or two, it's beginning to look like these things that once looked so harmless and in fact so positive have generated a dark side that nobody really foresaw, nobody really wants, and nobody really knows how to stop. For all of us here at Right Angle, I'm Bill Whittle. This show is made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. We just had an enormous rush of new people. They're so excited. Everybody's having a great time, and we'd love to have you join this family of people who believe basically in two things, and that's common sense and decency. If that sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, we'd love to have you. It's a great family, and the website is making that a place for you to connect to people without having to watch cats having their heads chopped off and all the rest of this horror that is out there on a daily basis. So until next week, for Steve Green, Scott Ott, and the rest of the one or two people here at this happy little crew, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.